Hey, Rick Bronwell, Assistant Equipment Manager of the Minnesota Wild here, and what I'm going to do today is show what I do to repair a tendon guard on a skate. Now, the problem with these this year, if you're familiar with the Total One, they made it with the actual cutouts here on the tendon guard. I had 6 of these break this year. 3 of them were actually in a game, and I kind of came up with a way that is simple yet efficient enough to get it done in a relatively good amount of time. This can be fixed. When it's done, it's not something that is probably going to last the rest of the season. I don't think it'll fall off again, but it definitely will get you through 2 weeks to get another new pair of skates in 3 weeks, depending on what rush Bauer has. So, and hopefully the new skates, they fix this problem. At least the ones we got, they seemed a lot better. But in the grand scheme of things, some guys are in a skate that they want forever, and it breaks, and this will give you something to sort of have an idea and maybe take 1 or 2 things from it. All right, so the first thing I do is, as you can see, this is a very clean break. I broke it on purpose. It wasn't, I don't have any official ones here that are broken the way they are, but a lot of times they're rigid through here. They kind of crack up, and if you had this happen before, then you might understand. And you can also use this for CCM skates and that type of thing too. To get it done other than the sewing machine, you can hand stitch them, but it's a laborious process, and it's something that if you have a week to do it, I guess you'd be good. So I use George's glue. Anybody that's not familiar with this isn't an ad for George's just because they're here in St. Paul. This glue is phenomenal for everything that's plastic, leather. I don't really use it on glove palms or anything like that, but this stuff works great for this, at least for the preliminary aspect. So I'm going to take this off, and I use some of these great earwax cleaners to dip in there because this stuff is so freaking sticky if you haven't used it. Get a liberal amount on that, and I make sure that I have it applied on both sides of the repair right here. And this works good. I had one guy break one in 4 different spots, and the actual one of the pieces had to be picked up by the ref and given to me. It was in Philly, and I got her done pretty quick, which worked out pretty well. So anyway, get the glue on there. There's really no time for it to set. I'll hold it, get it on where I need it to be, give her a little bit of pressure and hold it there for a couple minutes, and hopefully we can get that done. Usually the stuff is very straightforward, that glue. You'll put it on and it sticks right away. I had a little bit of a problem getting it to stick, but as you can see, I'm not really bending it hard, but it seems pretty solid where the break was right there. So now the next step in this whole process is I grab gaffer's tape, which is, I mean, if you don't know what gaffer's tape is, it's like a duct tape that's a little more pliable, and it's more forgiving on the sticky side, as far as like duct tape always leaves residue on stuff, and I don't want that. So I use this gaffer's tape because it seems to show the edges of the skate. So what I do is I take a couple pieces of it and I lay it over where I want to go on this tendon guard, push it down so you can sort of see the lines of where the tendon guard is, and I always overlap the whole area. Now I use this same thing to make anything on skates, anything that's hard to make templates for leather pieces, like if you're stitching an eye row, or if you're stitching a anything along that, like the forefoot area, you're stiffening up a side on an actual leather skate, which doesn't really happen very often anymore because no skates are leather anymore. So I guess if you have a graph skate or something like that. Usually takes me about 3 pieces to get where I want to go. That was a little long. And that's the reason I overlap, is because what I'm going to do now, and you'll see this in the next step of where I'm going with this. So, all right, now the next thing is, as you can see the basic outline of the tendon guard through that tape, and that's why I like the gaffer so much, is because you can see through it. Now duct tape is more shiny, so you can't see it as much. So I'll grab one of my X-Acto knives and I start trimming. And as I trim, I make sure to pay pretty close attention to where I'm trimming it at. And I want to make a little curl here to where it comes, where it attaches to the skate, because this is going to be my leather piece, and you'll see that in a second. But I'll make this cut, instead of coming all the way down the tendon guard and back up, I come across there, and that's going to give me more support on the flexation of the tendon guard. And I always follow the line. You can push pretty hard on this. The skate's pretty durable. You don't have to worry too much about cutting the skate itself, because you're just going to sew over it anyway. Just like that. And as I peel off each section, I peel off the tape of where I want the leather to go eventually. This is the most intricate part of the whole process of getting this thing done. And you don't have to be perfect by any means, but you do want to watch what you're doing, and if you screw up, you have to sort of remember where you were before, if that makes any sense. Most people might look at me like I'm crazy when I say it like that, but that's the truth. So I'll trim this down, and when I trim it, I usually go on the inside of the tendon guard lip, and I'll show you that. As you can see, there's a lip here, there's a stitch line, and I'll show you when I put this on the leather how I'm cutting it and why I do that. Turn this around. There we go. So now we have our template that we're going to use for the leather piece that's going to be stitched on the back of this, just to strengthen it up to get it back to normal. So you want to push down the tape, make sure that the three pieces are stuck to each other. If you have gaffer's tape, you can buy this stuff in like 2-inch wide stuff, so you don't have to use 3 pieces, you can only use 2. Maybe even 1 depending on how wide it is. I haven't found anything wide enough for that. But I'll peel this off. Like so. And then here's my template. So, grab your skate leather. Has to be pliable. You don't want it too thick because the machine won't go through it, but something that, well, I know Brownie, Mike Brown at the Skater's Edge sells the George's glue. He sells all the supplies you would need to do this. That's where I get all my supplies from anyway. So I take the tape and stick this on the leather. Make sure to get out as many of the creases as possible, because that's the shape I want. That's there. Grab yourself a nice pair of sharp scissors, and I'll cut out the piece I want first, so I can work with it a little bit easier. Now here comes the detail. And this is why I cut it inside a little bit, because I leave about a 1/4 inch line on the outside of the tape while following the lines exactly. Now you don't have to do this. You can, if you cut, when I trim this tape on the skate itself, you can actually trim on the outside. I choose not to do that. I like to have a little bit of overlapping as far as that goes. You can do it either way. That's just the way I do it. It's all personal preference. And like I said, what I say isn't the law. It's just what I do to do this. And I did so frickin' many of these things, it's nuts. You're just following the contour of that tape. Go back to the cutting just a little bit outside. And there we go. That being said, this now is garbage. You don't need this anymore. I've thought about taking this piece and actually transferring it to like a cardboard, so I could constantly have the same template for it, but it doesn't work because every skate's different, even from left to right. So you kind of want to do it the same. You want to do it to each skate you do. So now that we have this, the template cut out and the actual leather piece that's going to go on the skate eventually, I take it and I dry fit it on here with no glue, no nothing, just to make sure that I'm good on the actual fitment of it, that I'm not doing all this work for nothing. And we look good. So set the leather down, and this is going over to the big machine. Because what I'm going to do with this, what I'm trying to accomplish is I'm going to stitch this first in the big part, the thick part where the foam is in on the ankle. Because if I'm going to try to sew that piece of leather on this, it's not going to work too good. You're going to break the needle, and you still might break the needle because this stuff's so darn hard. But I'll go through here, and I know that this is the area I'm stitching. So I'll do a quick loop around, start right here, go up to the top, and then I come back around and kind of freehand it because I know where the leather's going. I'm just trying to compress this foam and plastic together so I can stitch the leather on when I have to. And I always use a pretty wide stitch on this. I don't think that's a huge difference, but as far as the stitch goes, I don't want to put that many holes in the skate. Because there's so much plastic and composite materials in there, you don't want the whole thing to break off. So anyway, just keep going around to get that foam nice and compressed. Sometimes you gotta help her along because she don't like to walk. To the top. I'm going to come around and I'm going to go at the top part of this foam because this guy is pretty thick in there, this custom skate. Now, if these are stock skates, it's way easier to stitch because they don't have nearly as much foam and materials on the inside. It always helps too if you have a brand new needle in the machine. I'm gonna go in the middle of these. See, right there, hit the bottom plate. All right, we're looking pretty good. I'm gonna trim that excess string off. Now that we have, and if you can see, I don't know if the camera can pick this up or not, but you can see on the inside there where I've stitched to compress this foam here, because that's where that tenon guard, the leather piece, the replacement piece is gonna go on. So now we're gonna go back and grab the leather, and we're gonna come right back to this sucker. And what I do here is I've experimented with different glues. This leather, that George's glue doesn't work very good and it sort of absorbs into it and it doesn't give you any stickiness or adhesiveness. So I pretty much go freehand when I sew this leather piece on. And I'll show you what I do. I always start off at the top of the one side. So in this area, the same place where I just stitched. So I'm gonna make sure my needle's in the up position. And I want this to kind of line up where I want it to go, right there. And I'm gonna put a quick little needle into it before I drop the foot. And I'm gonna come up and wrap this around and try to hold it there as I make a quick stitch. And all I'm trying to do here, what I'm trying to accomplish is I want to hold this in place because the toughest part to sew, believe it or not, is up top here because of that plastic. So there's really no forgiveness on it. You'll see that in a second. And this is more manipulating the skate with my hand than is letting the machine do the work, which is kind of like against what I've always been taught to do. It's kind of, you want the machine to work for you, not against you. But you have to really give it a little bit of elbow grease to get this to work because this is a pretty thick piece of leather that we're going into. And you're gonna find on the machine And it really depends on what machine you have, the stickiness of it, if that makes any sense. Because it does seem to stick in there, and you have to really, like I said, you're using your hand all the time on this. But once you get it going, you're usually pretty good. See, like right there, I got past the sticky part. Now I'm leaving myself about, between the needle and the outside of the leather, I'm giving myself, well, I don't even know how to measure that. It'd be like, what, 1/8 of an inch, I'd say. And that's so, it includes expansion of the leather and the shrinkage of the leather and that type of thing. Here we are stuck again. Because I'm stopping and I'm talking. Now believe me, I've done this before. I've never had to talk about it while I'm doing it, so if I look like a total moron, you'll have to excuse me. And we're not walking. There we go. Sometimes you have to do that too on these clays, that this thing sticks into the leather and you have to lift it up to get it to go forward. Sorry, I just hit the camera. Take it out of my budget. All right, go up. Now we're gonna come back down and go back to the other side, just like what we did when we stitched it previously to compress the foam. And then I'm going to lock in this stitch on the other side by trying to get it in the same holes that I went into before. And we should be good as far as that bottom piece goes. So there's the bottom. Now, what I got to do is get up here and stitch on the top piece, which how I do that is get it right along the top of this. So I'm going to start stitching right here. Hold on. There we go. And now I'm going to stitch this side of the tenon guard down. Following that same rule of thumb on keeping a little bit inside of the leather, not right on the edge. She's jumping around on me a little bit, but that's okay. I'm going to come back and lock that stitch in. Okay, now that side is done, so I'm going to go on and do the other side. And the whole time I'm doing this, I'm feeling underneath the tenon guard where I'm at on there, so I can kind of guesstimate on where I'm going to stop. Bring it down to where it meets the boot. Right there, because it's, there we go. I'll lock that in. We're trying to keep it in those same holes that I came in through before. Okay, so now that's locked in. Now, from here on out, the rest of this is relatively simple. It's kind of freehand, you can do what you want, because right now you're looking at a skate with these extra And I'm gonna have to trim a little bit there, but with this extra stuff, it's not coming off again, and it's gonna serve its purpose of protecting the Achilles, not necessarily for this. You're not doing this for the support, because it's never gonna be as stiff as it was when it was brand new or when it was one piece, because it's all one piece through this whole back end of it. But this will help stiffen it out a little bit too. So I'm gonna make a line here, come back down, come across here, go back up, come back down, and we should be good as that goes. And those are just extra reinforcement stitches to help stiffen it up a little bit. So again, with the hand motion. Okay, come back up this side. All right, now I'm going to come back down to about there, make another fan design. And I broke the thread, so we are going to change not change the thread, but re-thread it through. No big deal. If you break the thread, just as long as you re-lock it when you go to re-stitch it. And like I said, I'm amazed that this is the only problem we've had so far with as much stitching as we've done. Because usually you will break a needle or bend a needle, you break thread. Breaking the thread on this is quite common, happens a lot. And we're going to start again, starting with that same hole I was at when it broke. Drop the foot, and I'm going to follow these holes back up to the top. And that helps lock this stitch in so you don't have to worry about it coming out. This is where it gets tricky, because if you remember, that's where those ribs are that broke in the first place. Because they're not very conducive to sewing. I'm going to go under that stitch I had before. And then I'm going to come up on the inside of this, because you want to have two lines on either side. And try to make them, and this is where the aesthetics come in. You don't have to make it look perfect, but you know, whatever comes off your machine and you give to the player, I like to have the theory of make sure the player looks at it and it looks professional, like like the factory did it or somewhere close to the factory. In the all reality of things, if it works, it doesn't matter what it looks like in the grand scheme of things. But I've learned over time and sewing and practice of sewing that I like to have it look as close to factory as possible. Not a necessity, but definitely something in my mind I have to do, or else it drives me nuts and then you take the whole thing off and do it over again. So we got the skate guard stitched on there. As you can see, we're going to just trim off the excess thread, which is relatively boring for video purposes. We'll burn all that stuff off later, but if you can look, see kind of the pattern we did there. Now we added this material there, like I said, where you cut it off, and that's to help out with the actual stiffness of it. I'm going to trim this a little bit, this leather piece, because it was cut a little too big, and actually when I sewed it on, I kind of cockeyed it, and it's twisted this way a little bit, and that's why that end's higher than the other. But that's okay, because you can always trim later, just as long as you have the same general dimensions of that tendon guard. You should be good. I'm going to take a scalpel. I'm going to sort of form that one side since it's a little cockeyed. I want it even with this. So I think Mark always said you skiv it. To meet up with the other side. There we go. They're looking pretty good. I'm liking it. Came out nice. So, finishing touch. Get your lighter out. Burn off all the frayed ends. of the string so it kind of tightens it up too. Like on this part here where the stitch was kind of missing a little bit and it kind of didn't pull as tight as you'd want it to. You can use that to tighten up the threads on it. I'm gonna burn that too, because that looks good. Do the inside. Where you're at. And that should do it. I think we're good. Like I said, on this skate, when you have that, you can tell now just by looking at it that it's definitely not as stiff as it was, but I'm pushing pretty hard here and it's not going anywhere. So you're not going to worry about it falling off, and it's going to provide that protection that you want to provide to the player with getting his Achilles cut or something like that, and also gives you two to 3 weeks to get a new pair of skates in. So hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.